First story: The Horns That Waited Beyond the Last Fence. I grew up in southern Arizona, and for most of my life, the border was nothing more than a line on a map. People crossed it legally every day. Others crossed where they weren't supposed to. You heard stories about smugglers, abandoned camps, rattlesnakes, dehydration, and Border Patrol helicopters circling through the night. But there was one story the older ranchers refused to explain. Whenever someone mentioned strange sounds in the desert after midnight, they'd just shake their heads and say, "If something calls your name from the Mexican side, don't answer." I laughed the first time I heard that. I don't laugh anymore. 3 years ago, my younger brother Evan disappeared after getting involved with the wrong people in Tucson. Months later, I received a phone call from a man who refused to tell me his real name. He claimed Evan had survived and was hiding somewhere in northern Mexico. He said he couldn't use checkpoints, couldn't contact authorities, couldn't risk anyone knowing where he was. "If you want to see him again," the man whispered, "cross tonight." Everything about it sounded like a trap, but blood has a way of making people ignore common sense. Around 11 that night, I met 3 strangers outside Nogales. Miguel knew the trails better than anyone. Aaron had crossed several times before. The last man called himself Victor, although I doubted that was his real name. None of us asked questions. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds. The desert looked dead. We climbed through a damaged section of fencing and headed south, keeping our flashlights off. Only the stars guided us. The silence felt wrong. Not peaceful. Expectant. Every few minutes, Miguel stopped to listen. He never explained what he was hearing. After nearly 2 hours, we reached an abandoned cattle trail winding between black volcanic hills. Miguel froze. "Do you hear that?" At first, nothing. Then, a bell. One single cowbell. Slow. Heavy. Clang. Silence. Clang. Silence. Aaron frowned. "There aren't any ranches out here." Miguel looked pale. "We leave. Right now." Victor laughed. "It's probably livestock." Miguel grabbed his arm. No. There was terror in his voice. Real terror. Before anyone answered, the bell stopped. Complete silence swallowed the desert. Even the wind disappeared. Then we heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate crunch, 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 not walking toward us, circling us. I spun around with my flashlight. Nothing. Just cactus, rocks, mesquite, empty darkness. Victor shouted, "Who's there?" No answer. Then something answered from somewhere behind us. Victor's own voice. "Who's there?" Every word, every breath, perfectly copied. Victor turned white. That wasn't me. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The voice came again. Closer. This time, it copied Miguel. "We leave. Right now." Only the words sounded wrong. Lower, like they came from an impossibly deep throat. Miguel started praying in Spanish. Aaron grabbed my shoulder. "We're running." Nobody argued. We sprinted across the desert. Branches tore at our clothes. Loose rocks rolled beneath our boots. Behind us, crunch, crunch, crunch. The footsteps never became faster, but they never fell behind. No matter how hard we ran, it always remained the same distance away. After nearly 15 minutes, Aaron suddenly screamed. His flashlight landed beside a dry wash. I turned. Aaron was gone. There wasn't a sound. No struggle, no cry, only his flashlight spinning slowly across the sand. Victor ran toward it. Miguel tackled him. "Don't!" Victor shoved him away. "I'm not leaving him." He reached the flashlight, bent down, picked it up, then froze. I saw why. There were hoof prints. Not horse tracks, not cattle. Each print looked almost human, except every footprint ended in 2 enormous black hooves pressed impossibly deep into the earth. The tracks stopped beside Aaron's flashlight. There were no footprints leading away. Aaron had simply vanished. Victor backed away slowly. His lips trembled. What made those?" Miguel refused to answer. He just whispered, "It found him." The bell rang again. Closer, much closer. Clang. We looked toward the ridge. At first, I thought I was staring at a dead tree. Then it moved. It stood at least 8 feet tall. Its body looked almost human. Thin, gray. Its arms hung below its knees. Its head, God. Its head carried enormous twisted horns stretching sideways before curling upward like burned branches. Its eyes reflected no light, only darkness. It didn't walk, it watched. Victor aimed a pistol. Miguel screamed, "Don't." The gun fired. The sound echoed through the desert. The thing never flinched. Instead, it smiled, not with human teeth. Rows of long black fangs unfolded slowly from its mouth. The bell rang by itself, without moving, without anyone touching it. Victor fired again. Click. The pistol jammed. The creature lowered its head. Then everything around us became filled with whispers, hundreds of voices, children, women, old men, every voice begging, "Help me. I'm over here. Please. I can't move." Somewhere among them, I heard Evan. "My brother." "Cole." His voice broke me. I ran toward it. Miguel tackled me into the dirt. "If you follow them, you never come back." I fought him, until I looked ahead. There, standing only 20 feet away, were dozens of people, men, women, children, completely still, facing away from us. None of them moved. None of them breathed. Every one of them had enormous horns growing from their heads, slowly. Every single one turned toward us at exactly the same moment. Their faces were our own. Mine, Miguel's, Victor's, Aaron's, even Evan's. All smiling, all whispering together. "Come home." Victor broke first. He screamed and ran straight toward them. The copies opened their arms. The darkness swallowed Victor. His screams stopped instantly. The figures disappeared, like they had never existed. Miguel dragged me across the desert without looking back. The bell continued behind us for what felt like hours. Just before dawn, we reached the American side. The first rays of sunlight touched the fence. The bell stopped. Miguel collapsed. Neither of us spoke for nearly an hour. When Border Patrol found us later that morning, they searched the area. They found no sign of Aaron, no sign of Victor, no footprints, no campsite, nothing. Miguel refused to answer questions. 2 weeks later, he disappeared from his apartment. The security cameras recorded him opening his front door at exactly 3 o'clock in the morning. He smiled, walked outside barefoot, then left with someone standing just beyond the camera's view. Police never found him. I tried convincing myself it had all been exhaustion, fear, hallucinations, until last winter. I was cleaning my garage when I found sand inside one of my old boots. Mixed into it, a small rusted cowbell. I threw it into the trash. The next morning, it was hanging from my front porch. I burned it. That night, I woke to a sound outside my bedroom window. Clang. Silence. Clang. Silence. I looked through the blinds, across the street, under the dead streetlight. Something impossibly tall stood watching my house. Its horns stretched wider than the mailbox beside it. It never moved. It never blinked. Then, in my own voice, perfectly calm, it whispered my name. I never looked outside again after dark. But every year, on the exact same night we cross the border, the bell returns. Always 3 times. Always closer than before. And last night, for the first time, the footsteps didn't stop at my porch. They stopped outside my bedroom door. Second story. The customs gate that never existed. The moment I tell people this story, they usually smile politely. They think I had too much to drink, that I was exhausted after a long flight, or that my imagination got the better of me. I wish that were true. My name is Mason Carter, and this happened after I flew out of the United States for what was supposed to be the easiest vacation of my life. Everything began at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. I boarded a late evening flight to Costa Rica. The cabin lights dimmed shortly after takeoff, and nearly everyone around me fell asleep. I remember staring through the small window at endless layers of clouds glowing beneath the moon. The captain announced mild turbulence ahead, but nothing unusual. Then everything went silent. Not quieter, silent. The engines vanished. The air vents stopped humming. Even the crying baby a few rows ahead froze in absolute silence. Every passenger slowly opened their eyes at exactly the same moment. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Outside the window, the clouds had disappeared. There was only darkness, not night. Something darker. It felt as though the airplane was flying through an empty place where the sky had never existed. A woman across the aisle looked directly at me. Her lips moved. No sound came out. Then every light inside the cabin exploded back to life. The engines roared. The passengers blinked in confusion. The crying baby screamed again. Everyone acted as though nothing had happened. Everyone except me. Because the woman was still staring. She slowly raised one finger, then pointed toward the front of the aircraft. Hours later, we landed. The airport looked modern enough, although something immediately felt wrong. The arrival hall was almost empty. The electronic signs flickered between different languages every few seconds before settling on words I had never seen before. Nobody else seemed to notice. At passport control, a smiling officer stamped my passport without even opening it. He never looked inside. He simply pressed the stamp onto the closed cover. When he handed it back, his smile disappeared. "Don't leave the marked roads after sunset." I laughed awkwardly. "What?" He kept staring. "You heard me." That was all. Outside, I rented a small SUV and drove toward a mountain village where I had booked a cabin online months earlier. The drive was beautiful. Dense jungle, rolling hills, tiny villages. Everything looked exactly like the travel videos until sunset. The GPS suddenly restarted. Instead of showing roads, the screen displayed only one sentence: "Turn back before the third crossing." A second later, it shut off completely. I checked my phone. No signal. Not one bar. The road narrowed into thick forest. After another 10 minutes, I reached an old wooden bridge. There was no sign, no traffic, no lights. As I crossed, I heard something heavy running underneath the bridge, not beside it, under it. Whatever it was matched my speed perfectly. Boom, boom, boom. Each impact shook the bridge. I accelerated. The footsteps accelerated. I slammed on the brakes halfway across. The footsteps stopped instantly. Silence. I leaned out the window. Nothing, just black water. Then I heard breathing, right beneath me, slow, wet, patient. I drove away without looking back. About 20 minutes later, I reached the cabin. The owner had left the key under a flower pot exactly as promised. Inside, everything looked normal. Clean furniture, fresh towels, a welcome basket. Only one thing stood out. On the kitchen table lay a handwritten note. "Do not answer if someone knocks after midnight." I laughed again. Some local prank. I made coffee, unpacked my luggage, and tried to relax. At exactly 12 o'clock, knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks. I froze. Another 3. Whoever stood outside never called my name, never spoke, only knocked. The sound continued every few minutes for nearly an hour. Finally, curiosity defeated fear. I stepped toward the window beside the door. Very carefully, I pulled the curtain aside. Nobody. The porch was empty, but muddy footprints covered the wooden floor. They led toward the front door, not away from it, toward it, as though someone had walked out of the forest and disappeared into my house. The knocking stopped. A cold breeze drifted through the hallway. I checked every room. Nobody. Still, the footprints continued upstairs. I had never gone upstairs. My flashlight trembled in my hand. Each stair creaked beneath my weight. The footprints ended outside one locked door. I grabbed the handle. Locked. Something scratched softly from inside. Then a voice whispered, "Mason." My blood turned to ice. It sounded exactly like my older brother. Except, he had died 7 years earlier. The whisper came again. "I've been waiting." I stumbled backward. The scratching became louder, then heavier, like antlers dragging across wood. The entire door bent inward once, twice, 3 times. I ran downstairs. The front door refused to open. The lock spun freely. The windows would not break. The lights died. Only moonlight remained. Above me, slow footsteps. Not human footsteps. 4 legs, heavy, measured. Something descended the staircase. The smell reached me first. Rotting leaves, wet soil, old blood. Then I saw its shadow stretching across the wall. 2 enormous horns, long arms ending in claws. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its eyes reflected no light. They swallowed it. The creature stopped halfway down the stairs. It never blinked. Neither did I. Then it smiled. Its mouth opened far wider than any living thing should. Rows upon rows of black teeth. Behind those teeth, more eyes. Hundreds of them, all staring, all awake. Without moving its lips, the voice filled the room. "You crossed the wrong border." The walls began shaking. The cabin stretched impossibly long behind me. Doors multiplied along endless hallways, each one slowly opened. Inside every room stood another version of me, older, injured, terrified. Every one of them was trying to escape. Every one failed. The creature stepped closer. Its antlers scraped the ceiling with a scream that echoed through the house. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, morning sunlight poured through the windows. The cabin was empty. The front door stood open. My rental SUV waited outside exactly where I had parked it. Everything looked normal. I convinced myself it had all been a nightmare. Until I reached the airport for my flight home. The customs officer scanned my passport. His face instantly changed. He looked at me as though I had returned from somewhere impossible. "Where did you get this entry stamp?" "It was here when I arrived." He slowly shook his head. "This border crossing was permanently closed over 50 years ago." He showed the passport to another officer, then another. None of them spoke. Finally, one of them whispered, "No aircraft has been cleared through that checkpoint since 1974. They searched every database. There was no record of my arrival, no flight, no customs inspection, no rental vehicle, nothing. Officially, I had never entered that country. I flew back to Texas and tried to move on. Months later, I finally gathered enough courage to look inside my passport again. The entry stamp was gone. In its place was a dark handprint, not printed, burned into the paper. Sometimes in the middle of the night I wake because someone is knocking exactly 3 times on my apartment door. I never answer. But every morning, fresh, muddy footprints begin outside my bedroom. Not outside the apartment door, outside my bedroom. And every day, they come a little closer to my bed. Third story. The passport that came back stamped in blood. My name is Ethan Walker, and until that trip I believed every strange story I had ever heard could be explained. I trusted maps, I trusted airports, I trusted governments. Most of all, I trusted that if your passport was stamped when you entered a country, you would eventually leave it. I was wrong. Everything began after I landed in Romania for what was supposed to be a quiet vacation. I had flown from Boston after months of exhausting work. I wanted old castles, mountain villages, local food, and a few photographs before returning home. Nothing more. The locals smiled when I mentioned the famous tourist attractions. But everything changed when I casually asked about an abandoned village marked on an old paper map I had bought from an elderly bookseller in Bucharest. The smile disappeared. One old woman looked directly into my eyes and whispered, "That village still accepts visitors. It simply refuses to let all of them leave." Everyone else pretended they had not heard her. I laughed. I wish I had not. The following morning, I rented a small SUV and drove toward the Carpathian Mountains. The paved roads slowly disappeared. My phone lost its signal. Even the GPS froze, showing the same location for almost an hour. Then I saw the village. It looked untouched by time. Stone houses, crooked chimneys, wooden fences, no cars. No electric wires, only silence. The strange part was the smoke rising from several chimneys, as if families were inside preparing dinner. Yet I could not hear a single voice. No dogs barked, no birds sang. Nothing. The moment I stepped out of the vehicle, the air felt unnaturally cold. It was summer. I should have been sweating. Instead, my breath formed white clouds. An elderly man appeared beside a well without making a sound. I never saw him approach. He simply existed. He smiled politely. "Welcome. We have been waiting." His English sounded perfect. I asked how he knew I was coming. His smile widened. "We always know." Before I could respond, several villagers slowly emerged from different houses. Every one of them smiled. Every one of them stared without blinking. No one introduced themselves. No one asked my name. It felt less like meeting strangers and more like walking into a family reunion where everyone already knew me. I tried convincing myself they were simply unusual people protecting old traditions. That explanation lasted less than 10 minutes. I noticed a little girl watching me from behind a tree. She held a small wooden doll. The doll looked exactly like me. Same backpack, same baseball cap, same blue jacket. I had never been there before. There was no possible way anyone could have known what I looked like. When she realized I had noticed the doll, she quietly turned it upside down. At that exact second, my vision blurred. The world spun. I fell to one knee. The dizziness vanished only after she turned the doll upright again. She smiled, then she disappeared behind the trees. I suddenly wanted to leave. Immediately. I hurried back toward the SUV. The road was gone, the vehicle was gone, only forest surrounded me. The village had somehow moved, or perhaps I had. The elderly man appeared beside me again. "You should stay until tomorrow." His voice remained calm. "Nobody leaves after sunset." I checked my watch. It was barely 3 in the afternoon. 5 minutes later, it showed midnight. The sky remained bright. The sun still hung above the mountains. Time no longer made sense. I began running. Every path returned me to the same stone well. Every direction ended inside the village. Every attempt failed. The villagers continued smiling, watching, waiting. That evening, they invited me into the largest house. A massive wooden table had already been prepared. Plates covered every seat. There was only one problem. Every plate except mine held rotten food, crawling with insects. Yet every villager happily pretended to eat, chewing, swallowing, smiling. The sound of their teeth echoed through the room. No one spoke, until the elderly man finally raised his glass. "You crossed many borders to arrive here." Everyone repeated together. "You crossed many borders." Their voices sounded identical, perfectly synchronized, like echoes instead of people. Then they all looked directly at me. Tonight, they smiled wider than any human should. "The border crosses you." Every candle instantly went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Something breathed behind my chair. Not a person. Something much larger. Its breath smelled like wet earth and old graves. I refused to turn around. Slowly, a cold hand rested on my shoulder, except it was not a hand. It had far too many fingers. Someone whispered into my ear, "You still believe your passport belongs to you?" The lights returned. Everyone remained seated. No one had moved. Yet my passport now rested in the center of the table. I had left it inside my backpack. Across the room, the passport slowly opened by itself, one page after another, stamp after stamp. Countries I had never visited, dates before I'd even been born, languages I could not recognize. The final page remained blank. The elderly man handed me an old fountain pen. One signature. I refused. Every smile disappeared. For the first time, the villagers looked angry. The walls began trembling. Windows shattered outward. The floor cracked beneath our feet. Outside, hundreds of dark figures slowly emerged from the surrounding forest. They had no faces. Only empty skins stretched over smooth heads. Each carried an old suitcase. Each suitcase leaked thick black liquid. The elderly man quietly said, "They arrived without signing." The faceless traveler stopped outside every window, watching me, waiting. The little girl returned holding the wooden doll. She snapped one of its arms backward. My own arm exploded with unbearable pain. The bone broke instantly. I screamed. Nobody reacted. She twisted the doll's head slightly. My neck locked. I could barely breathe. Then she gently placed the doll beside my passport. "Sign." I grabbed the pen. Not because I wanted to, because my own body no longer obeyed me. The moment the pen touched the paper, someone outside screamed. Not from pain, from relief. The faceless travelers slowly turned away, one after another, walking back into the darkness. The villagers smiled again. The elderly man nodded. "You may leave tomorrow." Morning finally came. The road had returned. So had my SUV. Everything looked normal. I drove away without looking back. At the airport, the customs officer examined my passport. His expression changed immediately. He called another officer, then another. All three stared at me. One finally asked, "Sir, where exactly did you receive this exit stamp?" "I entered Romania last week." He slowly shook his head. "You never entered Romania." He turned the passport toward me. The final page contained a fresh crimson stamp. It was still wet. It read, "Departure approved, the kingdom of the dead." Below it was my signature. I had never written it, not willingly. The officers suddenly looked confused. One asked me why I kept staring over his shoulder. I answered without thinking, "Because they're following me." He turned around. No one stood there. But I could still see them. The faceless travelers, dozens of them, standing silently beyond the security checkpoint, each carrying the same leaking suitcase, each waiting patiently. Every time I travel internationally now, immigration officers always pause when scanning my passport. Their computers freeze. The lights flicker. For just a second, every monitor displays the same message before going black. Welcome back. No matter what country I enter, no matter how far I fly, they always know I have returned. And every new passport issued to replace the old one eventually develops the same crimson stamp. It always appears overnight. Still wet, still smelling faintly of fresh blood. I no longer travel for vacations. I travel because if I stay in one place for too long, someone knocks on my door exactly at midnight. 3 slow knocks. Always 3. When I look through the peephole, nobody is standing there. Only an old leather suitcase. Waiting. The handle is warm, as if someone had been carrying it only moments before. I have never opened it, because every morning after I ignore it, the suitcase is gone. But the wheels always leave 2 fresh tracks across the porch. They never lead away from the house. They always end right outside my bedroom door. 4th story. The country that stamped my passport twice. I never believe the stories people tell after they come home from traveling abroad. Jet lag becomes ghosts. Bad weather becomes curses. Strange customs become supernatural encounters. That was exactly what I thought before I flew from the United States to Romania. Now I keep my passport locked inside a steel safe, because every few months, someone stamps it, and I never leave my house. I live in Portland, Oregon, and 3 years ago, my best friend Ethan convinced me we needed one unforgettable vacation before turning 30. We skipped the crowded tourist destinations and rented a small SUV in Bucharest. The plan sounded perfect. Drive north through forgotten villages, old forests, and mountain roads until we reached places most visitors never saw. The first few days were incredible. Ancient churches, empty roads, stone houses older than the United States, friendly locals who smiled but always seemed nervous whenever Ethan mentioned our final destination. He had found it on an old travel forum, a mountain village called Valeni. There were only a handful of comments. No photos, no hotel listings, just one sentence that kept appearing. If they invite you inside after sunset, politely refuse. We laughed every time we read it. Internet legends always sound scarier than reality, or so we believed. By the time we reached the village, rain covered the mountains like gray smoke. The GPS stopped working almost 20 miles away. Cell service disappeared. Even the road changed from cracked pavement to packed dirt. The village looked abandoned. Maybe 20 homes, a tiny church, one narrow bridge, not a single car, only people. They stood outside watching us arrive. Nobody waved, nobody smiled. Every single person stared directly at us. An old woman finally approached the driver's window. "You came from America." It wasn't a question. "Yes." She nodded slowly. "You should leave before dark." Ethan smiled. "We only want to spend one night." She looked genuinely frightened. "You think this village is dangerous?" She shook her head. "No." Then she pointed toward the forest behind the church. "The road behind the trees is dangerous." That answer made even less sense. We thanked her anyway. A younger man offered us 2 empty rooms above his family's farmhouse. Everything looked normal. Simple furniture, wood floors, old photographs. No electricity except a few dim bulbs powered by a noisy generator. Dinner was quiet. Nobody asked about America. Nobody talked about politics. Nobody even introduced themselves. Every few minutes someone glanced toward the window, as if expecting someone to arrive. When darkness finally covered the village, every curtain was closed at the exact same moment. Every door was locked. Every outside light disappeared. Then, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Not on our door, on every door, one after another. Knock, knock, knock. The sound moved through the village with impossible precision, never faster, never slower. Ethan peeked through the curtain. There isn't anybody out there. The knocking continued. Our host immediately grabbed Ethan's arm. "Don't watch," his voice cracked. "No matter what you hear, do not watch." The knocking stopped. Complete silence. Then someone spoke outside. "American travelers." It was perfect English. "I found your passports." Ethan froze. Neither of us had taken our passports outside. They were inside our backpacks. The voice continued. You dropped them. Another pause. I only need you to open the door. Our host covered his ears. His wife started crying. The children hid beneath the table. The voice became Ethan's. Dylan, it's okay. Then it became mine. Ethan, come outside. Every word sounded exactly like us. Same accent, same breathing, same tiny pauses. Neither of us moved. Minutes later, footsteps circled the house, slow, heavy, almost dragging. Then they stopped beneath our bedroom window. Something scratched the wall, very gently, like fingernails. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It continued until sunrise. The instant sunlight touched the village, everything ended. Birds started singing. Children laughed outside. People smiled. It was as though nothing had happened. Our host simply said, You survived your first night. First? We packed immediately. We wanted to leave. The villagers begged us not to use the forest road. There is another route. It would take almost 6 hours longer. Ethan refused. The shortcut saves half the trip. Nobody tried arguing. Instead, every villager stepped away from our SUV, as if they didn't want to be near it. The shortcut entered a forest so dense that daylight barely reached the ground. After 20 minutes, we saw another SUV, same color, same rental company, same license plate, parked beside the road. Impossible. It was our SUV. Our own vehicle sat empty beneath the trees. Ethan laughed nervously. Someone's playing a prank. I wasn't laughing. The windshield had the same crack ours had from yesterday. The rear bumper had the same scratch. Even my backpack sat in the passenger seat. We walked closer. Inside, 2 people were sitting motionless, me and Ethan. Our doubles stared straight ahead. Neither blinked, neither breathed, neither moved. Then, both slowly turned their heads toward us. Their smiles stretched far wider than human faces should. Ethan screamed. We ran back toward our real SUV. The engine wouldn't start. The radio switched on by itself. Static filled the speakers. Then a calm voice. You already crossed. Neither of us touched the radio. The dashboard clock began spinning backward. 1 minute, 10 minutes, 1 hour. The fuel gauge emptied and filled over and over. Outside, our doubles slowly walked toward us, not running, walking. Perfectly synchronized. Every step matched ours. Every movement copied ours. Until they stopped, exactly where we had first parked. Then they turned around, walked back, entered the other SUV, and drove away. Our engines started instantly. Neither of us spoke for the next 4 hours. When we finally reached civilization, we agreed never to mention what happened. People would think we were insane. Back in Portland, everything slowly returned to normal. Until immigration mailed me my passport. Inside was a polite note. There appears to be an administrative error. There were 2 Romanian exit stamps. One showed the day I actually left. The second was dated exactly 1 year later. I assumed it was a printing mistake. Then another stamp appeared. Different ink, different date. Again, exactly 1 year later. No flights, no travel, no explanation, every year since then. A new Romanian exit stamp appears inside my passport. Always in fresh ink, always on the same page, always exactly 1 year apart. Last month, I finally gathered enough courage to call the Romanian border office. The woman asked for my passport number. She became quiet. Then she said something that still wakes me every night. Sir, you left Romania only once. She paused. But according to our records, you have never returned to the United States. 5th story. The passport that came home before me. My name is Ethan Walker, and until that trip, I laughed at every ghost story anyone ever told me. I was born in Colorado, raised on logic, and convinced that every mystery had an explanation if you looked hard enough. I used to tell my friends that haunted places only existed because people wanted them to. I don't say that anymore. The strangest part is that everything began with something completely ordinary. I flew from Denver to Romania for a 2-week vacation. I wanted castles, mountain roads, forgotten villages, and photographs that nobody else had. Everyone recommended the famous tourist attractions, but I preferred places that barely appeared on maps. The quieter the road, the better the story. That decision almost cost me my life. A man sitting beside me on the flight introduced himself as Michael Grant from Oregon. He had visited Romania several times and warned me about wandering into abandoned villages after sunset. "Some places aren't empty," he said with a smile. I laughed. "They're empty because everyone moved away." He stared out the airplane window. "No, they left because something stayed." I assumed he was trying to entertain himself during the long flight. After landing in Bucharest, I rented a small SUV and spent several days driving through the mountains. Every village looked older than the last. Stone churches leaned toward narrow roads. Wooden fences surrounded homes that seemed untouched by time. Elderly people watched passing cars without smiling. The further I drove, the fewer tourists I saw. On the fifth morning, I stopped at a tiny roadside cafe where an elderly woman served black coffee without saying a word. When I unfolded my map, she pointed toward a road that had been crossed out with red ink. "No," she whispered. I thought she meant the road was closed. She slowly shook her head. "No night." That was all she said. Naturally, curiosity defeated common sense. By late afternoon, I reached the beginning of that forgotten road. The pavement cracked into gravel before disappearing beneath thick forest. My GPS lost signal almost immediately, but I kept driving. The woods felt unnaturally silent. No birds, no insects, not even wind. It was as though the forest had been emptied of every living sound. After nearly an hour, I found the village. Only 6 houses remained standing. Every window was broken. Every door hung open. Yet nothing looked vandalized. It looked abandoned all at once, as if everyone had simply walked away in the middle of dinner. I parked beside an old stone well and stepped outside. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath appeared in front of me, although it had been warm only moments earlier. I began taking photographs. Each picture looked normal on the camera screen, until the 12th one. Standing inside the doorway of the largest house was a little girl wearing an old white dress. She wasn't there when I pressed the shutter. I looked up. The doorway was empty. I checked the photograph again. She was still standing there, looking directly at me, smiling. I convinced myself it was a trick of light. Then my camera turned itself off. The battery had been fully charged. When it powered back on, every photograph except that one had disappeared. I suddenly realized something. The village was no longer silent. Someone was humming, very softly, very close. The sound came from inside the largest house. Against every instinct, I walked toward it. The front door opened before I touched it. Inside, dust covered everything except a narrow trail across the wooden floor. Fresh footprints, bare feet, small enough to belong to a child. I followed them upstairs. Each step creaked louder than the last. The humming stopped. I reached the second floor and found a single room with faded wallpaper covered in tiny blue flowers. In the center stood a wooden chair facing the window. Someone sat in it. At least, I thought someone did. The chair slowly rocked back and forth, but it was empty. Then the rocking stopped. Something breathed directly behind my neck. I spun around. Nobody. When I faced the chair again, someone was sitting there. An elderly woman. She hadn't been there 1 second earlier. Her face looked impossibly pale. Her eyes were completely black. She pointed toward the hallway without speaking. Every survival instinct told me to run. So I did. I rushed downstairs, burst through the front door, and sprinted toward my SUV. The engine refused to start. Again. Then it started by itself. The headlights switched on. Standing beside the old well were 6 people. A little girl, an elderly woman, 4 men wearing clothes from another century. None of them moved. None of them blinked. They simply watched me drive away. I never looked back, at least. I thought I never did. Hours later, I reached a hotel in a nearby town. The receptionist frowned when she saw me. "Are you traveling alone?" "Yes." She hesitated. "You checked in with another guest." I laughed nervously. "No, I didn't." She slowly rotated the registration monitor toward me. There were 2 names, mine, and beneath it, unknown passenger. No passport number, no address, no nationality, just those 2 words. I assumed it was a computer error. The receptionist didn't. She quietly handed me my room key. During the night, I woke because someone knocked exactly 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty. On the carpet sat my passport. The same passport I clearly remembered leaving inside the hotel safe downstairs. I picked it up. Something felt wrong. Inside, every visa page had vanished. Instead, each page contained black and white photographs. Pictures of me, walking through the abandoned village. Looking inside the house, running toward my SUV. The final page showed me asleep in my current hotel room. The angle was impossible. Someone had taken it from inside the room while I slept. I searched every corner. Nothing. No hidden camera, no second door, no explanation. The following morning, I left immediately for Bucharest and caught the earliest flight back to the United States. During the flight home, I never once removed the passport from my backpack. After landing in Denver, I drove straight home. Everything felt normal again, for exactly 1 day. The following afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed my own number. I answered, only breathing, slow, patient. Then a little girl's voice whispered, "You forgot to say goodbye." The call disconnected. I changed my number. A week later, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was my passport. I stared at it for nearly a minute. That wasn't possible. My passport was already locked inside my bedroom drawer. Hands shaking, I opened the drawer. It was empty. The passport from the package was mine. Every photograph remained inside, except one new picture had appeared. It showed my front porch, taken from across the street. The timestamp had been printed beneath it. Tomorrow, not yesterday, not today, tomorrow. I didn't sleep that night. Just before sunrise, I looked through the front window. Across the street stood 6 figures, exactly like the ones beside the well, perfectly still. Watching my house, I called the police. They arrived within minutes. No one was there. The officers searched the neighborhood and found nothing. One of them smiled politely before leaving. Probably someone playing a prank. Maybe, that's what I wanted to believe. Until I reviewed my home security footage, the cameras showed an empty street all night. No figures, no movement, nothing. Except, at exactly 3 minutes past 3, the front door slowly opened by itself. No one entered. At least, no one visible. The camera inside my hallway recorded something different. The door opened, a shadow crossed the floor, then stopped outside my bedroom. The recording ended there, not because the power failed, not because the memory card filled up. The file simply ended. Every night since then, exactly 3 knocks echo through my house. Always at 3 minutes past 3. Always the same rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. I never answer anymore. Because once, curiosity made me open a door in a forgotten village on the other side of the world. Now, something from that village knows exactly where I live. And every year, on the anniversary of that trip, another blank page appears inside my passport, waiting for the next photograph.